And I call this meeting of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee to order. We have two guests here tonight. One is Jenny Schwartz, who will handle the next thing. And we have Clegg Flaherty, which I'm actually going to use for two things. First, for the Sewer Commission. And then there's something else that actually he's involved with where I'm going to ask him to switch hats and be a vendor for a second. All right. On the on this meeting regarding, I need somebody to move the motion to approve the sump pump ordinance, which we sent out earlier. I'm going to read it, and I need a second on that. So who wants to move it? I have Bill moving it, done, and I have Beth seconding it. Okay. So let me just read the resolution as it currently is here. Whereas the Darien Sewer Commission has found that its unauthorized discharge of the clean water has been shown to overwhelm the capacity of the town's sewer infrastructure, causing sewer overflows, backups, increased maintenance costs, and potential environmental and public health hazards. And whereas on March 3rd, 2026, the Darien Sewer Commission enacted Article 13, sump pump removal regulations under Appendix C of the Darien Code of Ordinances, prohibiting the discharge of stormwater, groundwater, and other clean water from sump pumps into the town's public sanitary sewer system. And whereas the enforcement of the Darien Sewer Commission's regulations require adoption of a municipal ordinance authorizing the imposition of monetary fines and the issuance of citations to enforce compliance with these regulations, and whereas in recognition of the seriousness of the issue and the importance of maintaining the integrity of the town's wastewater infrastructure, the Board of Selectmen on October 6, 2025, recommended the newly proposed Ordinance 22-52, sump pump discharge prohibitions, for adoption by the representative town meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the representative town meeting hereby approves the adoption of Ordinance 22-52, sump pump discharge prohibitions, as more specifically outlined in the documentation attached hereto and made part hereof. All right. So to just basically explain this, state law already says that discharging illicit discharges into a sewer system is illegal. And under 7-148, there is a litany of fines that we can do. For the discharge, that is included in the other ordinance that deals with this subject, which is Article 11. In this particular case, we're entering some new territory, which is the information that we're requesting from those who are part of the sewer system. In order to find that, that's not necessarily defined in state law. So we have to pass the ordinance to give it the appropriate teeth that it needs to move forward. There was some discussion by not only Amy Zebatakis, but TGSNA and myself, and we had a discussion with Bobby Burney at our last meeting about some of the areas. From my view of the new regulations, with the understanding that regulations are the purview of the commission, all right? However, since we're asking to do an ordinance that supports that, we're able to just look at it and make comments on it. But a substantial number of the comments that were made, Bobby took into account, and my reading is that I don't have problems with it as of today. I believe, and Craig, you can possibly correct me, but the Sewer Commission met last week, and I'm sorry, TGSNA rather met last week on Thursday. There was an amendment that they were proposing, we are not dealing with that amendment for here. We're dealing with the ordinance as it is stated and the regulations which I've passed around. Um, from our perspective, we joined this party not because I thought F&B should look at regulations from the sewer commission. Last thing on my mind. We joined this party because at the last meeting that was brought before the RTM, there seemed to be a lot of confusion that what goes on in the sewer commission has no effect on people's mill rate or taxes. So part of what we're going to be discussing, and I'll do some preliminary discussion of it now, is that during the budget, typically item H, when we approve the budget, there's appropriations authorizations for several funds. Three of them are the sewer funds, two of them are parking, one is the recreation program, and the other one is Great Island. So the three funds that the sewer commission has is the sewer operating fund, which just deals with the operations, the assessments, and dealing with that. There's the sewer assessment fund, which really serves as collecting for the debt. So if we put a sewer line into a road, the people along that road pay for the debt service to pay off the installation of that sewer line. That's what that one accounts for. And the last one is the sewer capital fund. That has some residual on it for things that they intended to do, but may not have gotten through. So it's very similar to the reserve for capital non-recurring assets. And it also, if something's under, that fund balance is there. Currently, there's approximately 140,000 in it as at the end of last year. The super operating fund, based upon what goes there, there's the audited amount is like $1.7 million. That's there to handle any emergencies that might come through or any unexpected expenses. So, so that's pretty much what we're going to be covering when we give our report. We'll also be covering some minor things along the lines of, what I just mentioned, that there's a significant amount of water that enters. There's the commission and Ed, if you recall, especially in the ARPA, which I was talking about at the last meeting, they've been doing some I&I, and I always remember what the first I is. It's infiltration. I forget what the last one is. But they've been resolving some of that. And as Ed says, you can actually see the results of the amount of water that's being processed at Stanford. The other thing to mention is, there's 3 pumping stations that out of the 14 that have excessive use whenever it rains. That ends up building more for the capital. Now, only those of us who are hooked up to the sewer pay for what's going on with the operations and other things like that. Doesn't affect taxes. If there's debt, every house along that line, that address or that road, pay off the debt for the debt that's taken out. It can only be done by the town. The commission doesn't have the authority, similar to the Board of Ed. And the sewer commission reimburses the town for the amount of debt that's paid off on an annual basis with interest. I will give you one interesting aside. In a home that I owned in Darien, we had a sewer line near the tail end that we were still paying off the debt for the sewer line, even though we were not hooked up, because the line was above the basement and where the sewer was, and the expense to hook up was too great. Besides that, we had a very big backyard, and the grass over the leaching fields were really green. So there wasn't really a reason to do it. But so those who are paying it off, this is a self-contained series of funds. So are there any questions on any of this? Seeing none, do you have any questions for Craig, who's the head of the commission? Seeing none, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Doug, did you raise your hand that you have a question? You have to unmute
I
yourself.
fear that I came in late again, and I apologize for being 5 minutes late. But the I see my neighbors have like 10 gallons of big jugs of water being delivered every week, and then I know how many pop cans I have. You know, does that water that goes through us that we buy? Because I don't think I drink any water out of the tap. I think all the water we drink is bought times how many people. You know, does that go into the inflow of
You
the
don't do
sewer?
300 million gallons of water, which is the difference between what they process and what we buy.
Yeah, okay, but there's got to be some part of that that's coming
Yes, and there's
from
still some
okay.
infiltration from the water where they're relining the sewer lines. Understand, some towns have both a sewer line and a storm drainage line
Yeah.
in the same thing. We do not. They're two separate systems. So,
You know, I've had sub pump issues here, but I didn't have a sub pump run at all. With the rain we had last week and the snow melting, I didn't have a single sub pump turn on at all. So
so the question really, Doug, is do you know where your sump pump discharges to?
well, the deepest one discharges outside. The second deepest one discharges outside. The third one discharges into the sewer, but it's got to really get high. It's never run since I've been here. Never
Okay,
turned on.
so I'm going to answer it, then I'm going to let Craig give you the answer too.
And
Uh,
I'm also downhill of public property. So the flooding that I would have that would turn into the sewer is coming from the school property,
all
not
right,
from,
you're still going to be asked to resolve the one that's going into the sewer line, even if it only happens once a year, because that's against state law. So I'll let Craig give the more professional answer than what I just did. Craig,
but
have fun.
when they did this, they did it because I'm taking the water off the soccer fields potentially.
Well, still, it's an illegal thing. So if you identify it, the town will work with you to come to some resolve.
I have a pipe that comes right from the yard to that thing. It would take literally $20 to put a PVC pipe connecting to put it into the yard. It's never run.
All right, so
It's only there for the time
Doug,
of the
we're not
soccer
here to.
fields.
I'm just gonna, rather than have the thing, I'm gonna let Craig answer from the commission's perspective. And if it's only a couple PC pipes, that's even better. But Craig, you're on.
Sure. Craig Flaherty, Chairman of the Sewer Commission. Um, I'm not going to get into the specifics of any one individual's circumstances and how to resolve that, right? I think we're talking about a town policy. I would count yourself lucky that in this particular spring, which is a uniquely wet spring, that your sump pumps don't run. I think you're in the lucky category, and you should be grateful for that. But yes, we want all sump pumps that are connected to our sanitary sewers to be disconnected from our sanitary sewers. And I hope many of those circumstances are easy, like yours, sound to be. Some won't be as easy.
When they built it, they built it with that possibility that it could be
Yeah,
immediately
I mean,
switched.
again, I'd be grateful. I think you're in a good position. Um, but in terms of residual use water, it's in the single digits of percentage, right? You know, you put wet clothes in the dryer, and that moisture goes out a vent in your house. It doesn't go down the sewer drain, right? So there is some loss between your Aquarian water bill and your sewer discharge. We drink. I have filtered water under my sink, so we don't buy water. We just drink tap water. But I think everybody does something different. There is some single digit amount that is consumed and lost. That's not a direct relationship, but as we said, I think just before the meeting started, in a wet year, roughly half the water that we're paying Stanford to treat, and we're paying them $3.5 million a year to treat our water. Half of that water in a wet year is clean water. And we know that because we know how much water our sewer users are buying from Aquarian, and we know how much water Stanford is charging us for based on the meters that go over the line. And that's really what we're trying to address. And we've been trying to address the public side for the last 6 years now. Lining leaky pipes, flood-proofing manholes, and doing all that sort of thing on the public side. But we're missing a big piece. And so, we want to address the private side as well. And that's what this is about, this whole initiative.
I'll also add just one other thing, and then we can move on unless there's more questions. Doug, the town wants to work with you. So that's the one thing that the commission has been very open about. This whole thing isn't to get fines. We don't want the fines.
We don't.
We want the solution. So
Why can't you just monitor how much water goes out of the site?
We can't. And it's to fix the problem. I understand, but
I have 3 levels.
I
have
understand,
one.
Doug, we're not going to talk about the
Yeah, okay,
incident.
all right.
You can talk about that with the commission.
But
Please
I've
identify it.
already told them about my situation before. I know that.
Go.
the big
So,
picture,
Jack-
again, not to get into specifics, but the big picture is, can we just charge someone for the water that they're putting into the sewers, just like we charge them for the effluent that they put into the sewers? And what happens is 2 things with that water. The amount of clean water that we get, especially during rainfall events in the spring, intense rainfall events, overwhelms our sewers. So we can get sewer surcharges and sewer overflows because we're letting that water into the system. That's a public health problem. We have to report it to the DEP. We've been exposed to the potential of lawsuits, and we've actually had to settle one with Save the Sound based on some of our sewer overflows in the past. So it's not a good financial direction, and it's not a good health direction, even if it was allowed, which by local ordinance and state ordinance, it's already not allowed. And so anyway, there's a lot of other reasons besides just the money to want to separate that water from the sewer.
In addition, one of the things that I'm going to add is that for all of us who are on the line, we're probably paying 20% more than we should because of this.
Yeah, you definitely, there is a sense of fairness, which a number of my commission members are sensitive to. If there is a small proportion of people discharging clean water into the system, all of the sewer users are paying for that. So I don't think that's, it's not plainly fair, but even as a fiduciary of the sewer system, it's not fair either.
All right, Pierre, you had a comment?
I do, and only because Greg's on the phone. I looked very closely at a rainwater catchment system for my house, put big tanks underneath, basically get away from aquarium completely. I don't think that's prevalent in the town of Darien, but it would really impact things if people started doing that. Because all of a sudden, I'm not paying an aquarium bill, but I am running water through my house as if I were.
Yeah.
Do you track that through permits? Or like
the one similar situation that we have is we have a number of users, maybe it's 100 or something in that range, that have private wells.
Yeah.
That are connected, and their house is connected to the sewer. And so we come up with an average use. So what's the average household use in a given year? And we create a rate that we call a well rate that we will charge those users that are hooked up that don't happen to have a water bill.
So there's definitely a concept that exists.
Yes.
For sourcing your water other than
if you went off grid, which basically a private well is off grid.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a way to fairly charge for your use.
Okay, that was my question, not to belabor it. I was just curious. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Are we ready to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of passing the ordinance,
Aye.
raise your hand and say aye.
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 Laura, are you in favor? Yes or no? Yeah, okay. Doug, are you saying no?
I think I have to abstain.
Okay, that's still fine. And I can explain your situation without getting personal. Without saying Doug said, no. All right.
I didn't do it. The city approved.
No,
The
I
city
know
was
that's
here.
the big problem. All right. So while I still have Craig here, I want to talk about something else, and it's, I believe, item 4 on the agenda. But if you recall, in the January meeting, Redness and Mead proposed doing a topographic survey of Great Island that originally included the survey of trees as well. And then it was decided that we should be able to use the GPS survey that was previously done. So that was discussed during our approval of that appropriation. And as it turns out, we can't use the GPS. So the Board of Selectmen went back to Redness and Mead and said, oops, what is it going to cost to do this? And the cost is $6,000. Now, while I said that virtually everything that comes through the RTM will be, or Great Island will be coming back to the RTM, I spoke to a number of people who actually are on this committee, several other members from Rules, Seth Morton, Amy Zavatakis. And we all came to the conclusion that since we knew that the original survey was dependent upon using the GPS analysis that was there before, and we discussed it during our appropriation, and the fact that that information is unusable, do not bring $6,000 back to the RTM at this time. Deal with it at the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and take it out of the Board of Finance Capital Reserve. And since this amount was not bonded to begin with, it has no effect. So that was agreed to virtually to everyone that we consulted with, including members of our committee. And so I'm just bringing that up to date. Craig, did I properly describe the situation?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Okay. So this is just so that it's transparent and out in the public. We also anticipate along a similar line that when the Board of Selectmen cut the $25,000 for legal expenses associated with the $475,000 that we just approved for Great Island planning and design, they should have kept a little legal fee in there so that they can have a contract written with Reed Hildebrand. They did not. So again, rather than it coming back to the RTM, and I'm anticipating it should be less than $10,000. And if it's not, then we'll have a conversation that they're charging too much for the contract. That too will go to when it's finalized and they have the legal estimate for doing that contract from Curtis Brinkoff, then that too will go to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and not come back. It's also because that is similar to what we just talked about in the survey. The Board of Selectmen does not need to get competitive bids on anything that's professional services. And since they could have just done this anyhow, and then just add this, whatever that amount is, that too will not be coming back to the RTM. So I just wanted to cover those two areas so that this committee knows and it's in the public that we made a business decision with management not to bring those forward. And if anybody has a problem with it, send me an email. I may or may not respond to it. But sorry, I'm joking,
I just want you to say you're joking.
Yeah,
You are being recorded.
yeah, I know, I am joking. But yeah, we actually covered the first one with about 10 or 15 people, and this other one we covered with another committee chair and Seth, and we all came to the same conclusion. So with that, we can move on to the next. Craig, thank you very much. Um, and I appreciate the work that you did.
Yeah, thank you all for your service.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, just talking about it, that's most of what our report is. We're not going to be making comments on the regulations. That's for Public Works and TGS&A to do any comments on that. We were just here to clarify the financial aspects of what it is, because at that meeting, a lot of people still thought that what we were talking about was affecting their taxes, and it is not. And somebody actually looked at the number of RTM members that are hooked up to the sewer, and approximately over about 80% of our RTM members are in fact hooked up to the sewer line. So this is a way that you can save at least a lunch if this gets resolved. All right. Next on our agenda is to have a discussion of the debt service. So I've asked Jenny to join us. She's a former, for those who do not know, she was a former FB member prior to going to the dark side of the Board of Finance. And periodically we remind them that they're still Jedis. So let me sort of explain part of what goes on. Over the last eight bond issuances, we have not been spending straight line on principal over the life of the debt. We've been having 2 years of interest only payments, which increases the payments over the other 18 years if it's 20-year debt, as we start to pay off principal and interest. And there's a cost to that. We were starting to do it because we had about $100 million of debt, and we pretty much knew what was being paid in pay down of debt every year versus what we were adding on. And we weren't adding on $20 million of a debt or the greater amounts. But in that time frame now, remember, we purchased Great Island. We also did $103 million of HHR. We also had $60 million for Ox Ridge. And we've seen our debt increase significantly. And so they've been having some of this conversation. I'll tell you some of my concerns, and I expressed some of them at the Board of Finance meeting. Some I did not. There is a discussion right now that Moody's doesn't like towns having 10% of their budget being debt service. Well, that's true for most towns. It's not true for Darien. And I believe it was stated by Mark, the bond advisor, during the meeting. Darien has $11 billion of debt, and our tax collection rate of 99.8% of our taxes allows us to have more than 10%. In addition, my concern is that if we're using the 10% guideline this year, and we know what's coming down the road next year and the year after, then the 10% has to be the guidelines for the next couple of years, including adding $50 to $90 million of Middlesex school debt. And so if you don't want to be over 10% in your debt service, it means you have to start to turn down capital investments and appropriations with bonding. And I don't think that's where the town wants to be. So that was one concern. Using, I believe, Jenny, you can nod your head, I believe using 1 year of deferral the incremental cost to the town was $1.9 million. As it relates to Great Island, I actually think the cost of the town is more because even at a 2.5% interest rate for approximately $50 million, that's $2.5 million of interest-only payments we made for the ban for Great Island for 2 years, roughly, between 2 to 2.5 million. So the real cost to the town by incurring additional years of interest-free debt is really in the neighborhood of $3 million or more. And I think that's how it has to be looked at. The last part that I have mentioned a little bit last year, and then I'll mention something else. The fact is that this year, and I still have to mail this out, January 31st every year, the new grand list is signed off by Tony Hamicki, and this year our grand list grew by 1.5%. That means if you apply this year's mill rate to the growth in the grand list, it's generating $2 to $3 million more in taxes without doing anything. So the choice is, do we take that $2 to $3 million to pay down expenses in a one-time, one-year approach because somebody doesn't like the mill rate going up by 4%? Or do you bite the bullet this year and incur the pay down of principal and not do a one-year deferral? This is a year, in my opinion, to do that because we have those extra funds. And I think that last year, F&B said that a 4 to 5% increase in the mill rate over the next several years should be expected. We were the first ones to say that. And in October, John Zagroski in his presentation said the same thing. So if we're going to continue to make the investments that we're doing in the town by adding personnel, by looking at maintaining the school budget even at 3.5%, funding the library the way we do, and do the capital investments we're doing, one has to accept that a 4 to 5%, not that I like it, but a 4 to 5% is going to occur for the next couple of years until we're paying down more. I'm just looking at, which is in tomorrow's analysis. In fiscal year 26, we paid off 3.4 million, and this is based upon principal payments, not just the whole thing coming mature. In 27, we're about 7.4. In 28, we're about 9.5, then 9.2 in 29, then 9.7. And then for the next 3 years, we're between 10 and $11 million being paid off. We're adding more than that amount in our debt. We have possibly a $5 million access project that's coming down. I mean, it could be 3, but it could be 5, it could be more. For Great Island, we also have a, hold on for 1 second, please. Okay. We also have possibly a $6 million drainage project that's coming up that we'll see in September or October. It's Saltbox Lane, I believe, is the one. I'm not worried about the fire engines because we don't have to deal with them for another 3 to 4 years when we actually get delivery. And at that time, the town can decide for $1 million, $1.5 million, we don't want to incur incremental debt. All we're going to do is pay off rescind the debt, get a special appropriation, and we can pay off fire engines. That's basically what Jenny and I put together when we changed from accruals to bonding. So thank you, Jenny, for a lot of work on there. That was reviewed by town council and bond council, and they said that the work that Jenny did was spot on, which is just an independent recommendation for the work Jenny does. But anyway, there's a couple of terms that I thought was worthwhile to explain. One is the term level debt. So I'm going to hand a little bit over to Jenny and have her explain some of the things that the Board of Finance is going on, and then come back and, as well as her opinion on certain things. But to explain what level debt means, to explain this year the difficulty because we're doing both 30-year debt and 20-year debt in the same bond unit. I believe that's correct because we have the Coons lot in Great Island at a reduced rate. It's 46.5 instead of the 49 because 2.5 will be rescinded. So we'll have that amount going approximately 51 million going in 30-year debt. And then we have 15 and a couple other projects that's going at 20-year debt in the same bond issuance, which gets a little confusing. So anyway, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny because she's much more adept at explaining this than I am. All yours.
What are we talking about? No. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so the last week at the Board of Finance meeting, we talked about two things around debt structure. One was the amortization style, and then the question whether or not to defer or not. And I'm waiting for, we are waiting for an analysis to come back from our financial advisor, our municipal advisor, to run the numbers so we have a clear side by side. The two things are structuring how we used to structure bonds back in the day, probably Liz Mao days, right? As and before John and Jim kind of changed the way that we amortize debt, we would structure level principal, which was a way to accelerate debt because you would pay the principal off pretty quickly, and therefore the interest payment was accelerated as well. So when I say debt service, it's the principal plus the interest is total debt service. The most customary way to structure it, and the reason why I would say I'm going to take a guess 99% of the issuers out there structure level debt. There's a way to structure the principal payments so that the total P&I every year is within a few couple, tens of thousands at the most, is the same. And that's great for budgeting, being able to predict, if you're a finance director and a CAO, you can actually to smooth out our debt service curve, you structure bonds with level debt. So I'm a level debt girl myself. I think that's really clean and simple for it, for having the finance director be able to manage budgets. And then as we layer on more debt, you just layer it right on top. How it used to be done is we used to have hills and valleys of our debt because of the way how fast some bond issues used to pay off. And over the course of the past, 10 something years, we've moved to more level debt and more debt service smoothing. The second part is why have we been using some deferred principal? And there's a couple reasons. It's a very effective tool. I have done that back in my Muni nerd financial advisory days. You do that to help smooth out the debt service curve. So if you have a choppy debt service curve and you want to smooth it out, you defer principal into the holes, if you will, to create more of a smoothing effect. And particularly that was a main reason why I think the Board of Finance switched to using deferred principal at times. And Great Island had another nuance to it, was that when we bought it, we had some tenants on that property. And the tenants needed time we needed to figure out a year or so to what was going to be the ultimate structure of the bonds once the tenants were no longer going to be there. So
I want to interrupt for a second. The reason why that was done is that if a certain percentage of revenue is coming in from that property, then it's not all tax free.
Tax exempt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tax exempt rather. I was looking from my perspective. Tax exempt bonds. And so by having less renters there and not doing $1 million weddings there currently, um, we're able to structure it that it's tax exempt bonds. And that was part of the reason why we went into bans. In addition, we also had some expenses there, such as 23A and some other things that we were going to do, but we had money put aside, but we didn't know how much we were going to spend over the next 3 years. So rather than bonding the whole thing, we did bonding for the acquisition and the circle, and the rest of it was rolled over for 2 years in bands. Okay, back to you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, perfect. You stole my thunder. No, it's perfect. So the reason there's time and a place for sure to deferring principal. Now the discussion last week, if you didn't watch the meeting, was around have we already accomplished what we've set out to do? The original thought was they proposed some numbers of doing 2 years deferred principal, and there was enough discussion at the Board of Finance saying, well, let's let's not do 2 years. Let's look at one. We'll look at 1 year and wait for that analysis to come back and see how much are we actually saving by deferring 1 year you do it for cash flow savings. So how much cash flow savings are we saving in 1 year in exchange for increasing your overall debt service? Because when you defer a year, you're pushing principal to be amortized a little higher out on the yield curve. So it does increase a little bit your weighted average maturity and your overall debt service costs. So I asked our finance director, Josh, and our Muni advisor to just kind of pull together those numbers so we have it in a one sheet so we can see it side by side. And then we make a decision.
I want to add two other things to that. First of all, it was discussed that if we're deferring principal, whether or not it's 1 year or 2 years, we pay a higher rate than if we were doing level principal throughout the debt. So that's number one. That's one of the costs. The other cost is that we're paying more interest because for 1 or 2 years, we're just paying principal. And so what would we be paying off then over years, either 2 through 20 or 3 through 20, has had an increased amount of interest that we're paying, and it's paying off higher because, like a mortgage, if you had 2 years free mortgage, your interest rate would be higher. So that's somewhat similar to what's going on. So
Yeah,
these
and it
are
has
some
to
of the
do,
nuances.
it's really, the way municipal bonds are priced. It's not as clean and simple as probably the other fixed income markets. There's a scale that's an upward sloping yield curve. And so earlier maturities are obviously, it's like if you ever looked at our official statements, the yields are like incrementally every 5 basis points. So yeah, just a little bit further. We push the principal a little bit out a little bit further. It's just a hair more expensive, but in the category of it's the law of large numbers, right? When we're starting to get into some when you're only issuing $6 million and it's on and interest rates are 2, you probably don't feel it as much. But now we're kind of past that, and we are all keenly aware of the capital requests that are coming down, not just next year, but within the next 6 years, and they're not nothing. We've got ADA improvements that are lining up. And yes, Middlesex that's a big range, 50 to or 60 to 90 million. Who knows where that's going to end up? So timing of capital rollout is going to be really important. One of the graphs that they included in our packet last week, I'm sure they'll include it again, is the overall debt service profile. And I did note, and that was also kind of my thought of, I don't know that we need to keep deferring principal 2 years because we've leveled out. The next 10 years to like 2037 is pretty flat in terms of debt service curve and debt service profile. So, you know, the tools of deferring principal are really helpful. I think our argument was we've kind of accomplished what we've needed to do, at least the Board of Finance before me set out to do that. So that's the analysis we're waiting to hear back, and we're going to be talking about that tomorrow.
Hey, Jack, can I ask some questions?
No. Yes, of course. Sorry.
I feel like I'm at school. I got to ask the teacher.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Well, right now it's Jenny's the teacher, so go ahead.
that's kind of why I'm asking the questions. Thank you, Jack. So I'm just puzzled by this concept of level debt for a town. And bear with me. It's like, I get that it's a lot easier for the finance department and people who are budgeting to have a, fixed number that they know they have to work into the cash flows. What I don't understand is for that convenience, because it's a convenience, we are paying a lot. Like it adds up to millions of dollars in interest that we're paying because we don't want to have to deal with the numbers moving around. And I haven't heard a good explanation of why the level debt kind of saves the town money in some other way. Maybe I'm missing something here,
It
but
manages, yeah. So it doesn't save as much as you think. Okay. It does save, but it also creates spiky debt service, which means spiky operations and therefore spiky mill rate. So
But
it's a
I'm going to take an exception to that.
wait, Jack, let her
Go
finish.
ahead.
Let her finish. I told you, she's the teacher now. You have to be quiet.
So it's a way for cash flow predictability, and it's not, I mean, I would say state of New York has a interesting, and it's been a long time since I ran those numbers, but they have rules around how principals to be amortized.
Mhm.
And they're all about like no principal payment can be more than 140% or 150% of any prior. They make it so that you can't play games with principal,
Mhm.
right? So I think if you wanted to see like what's the real cost, you could run, I think in our last packet, and I could pull it up if you, well, I can
Mhm.
send it to you. The financial advisor ran a level, kind of a more level principal versus a level debt
Yeah,
service
I
summary.
looked at that. That's part of
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
got me thinking about
yeah.
this.
So it's because we were looking at very high, relatively high indebtedness coming down
Mhm.
the pipeline. It was a chance we did it this way to help smooth out. I mean, if you want to make that argument, then maybe you don't do, you would do all your debt service as short as possible, right? If you really want to keep it the cheapest,
Yes.
but you're gonna cause an impact on the mill rate that is
Well,
going to be
and
erratic.
that's the point I heard you say is one of the reasons is to manage the volatility of the mill rate, right?
And the operating budget.
And the operating budget.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
like,
that's
could you do Great Island in 20 years? You could. Do you really want to swallow that? I mean,
uh,
the
but
that,
that's part of the place where, because I've been doing this for over 20 years, we didn't have spiky interest rates. What happened is
yeah,
we were managing what we were adding on based upon what was coming off. And
Hmm.
that's how we started to do it. We started to do the 2 years interest free because, by the way, back when Liz was the chair and her predecessors, the goal was we weren't going over $100 million in debt. That was
right,
the glass ceiling that nobody was going to do.
right.
Um, so it was easy enough to manage that by what we're adding on, we're taking off, and going from there. We also probably deferred some capital improvements on our schools and other things just because of that. So it doesn't always necessarily work. But this concept of level debt is for one bond issuance. And it would be good if we knew we had, which we do now, we have $80 million of stuff that we will be bonding, if not this year, putting into a ban. All right. We are going to be adding significantly more. The peak under what we have currently happens in 27 at $248 million. But as I mentioned, we have at least a $5 million access. We have $2 million, which is a swag on the dredging of the channel near Pear Tree Point. We have another 6 million coming down. And just by adding that, we're up to 13 million. So we're paying off 7 and we're adding at least 13, and then we're probably adding more because we don't know all the projects that are coming down the road. There's more, I'm sure, coming out of Park and Rec. There's some ADA compliance that will be addressed, and other things. Now, there is a decision that nothing's at under under $1 million will be bonded. That was a policy change instituted about 2-3 years ago because we were bonding everything because rates were so low. It was like we were paying nothing. Rates weren't low, and so that was instituted. Yes, it's good for spiky, but it's also when you know that you have a lot coming off and you're not adding a lot on. The fact of the matter is we do know that we're going to be adding a lot on. So the level debt is for 1 year, but then we're going to step up with another level debt, and it's almost becomes a vicious cycle that we almost have to do interest only because we're more concerned about a mill rate than we are, and not concerned about, Pierre, what you mentioned, that there's a cost to doing this to the taxpayers. The other reason why we keep it at 20 years is you want the people who are getting the use of that capital improvement to be paying for it. So you don't do it over 10 years and we don't pay cash for it. The 30-year on the Coons lot and Great Island is because that's property and we're allowed to do a max of 30 years, and people for 30 years will get use out of both of those lots. So that's where I'm saying I have a slight disagreement, having experienced it on the spikiness that we were experiencing. What happened is we started adding debt. And
can you mind if I share my screen really quick,
sure,
just to show them this? I don't know if I can. I can try, but I'll show you the debt service profile. And
yeah,
let me see.
that was sent out. If you went into the, I sent out an email. There we go.
That's what it looks like.
So that's
what
a very
helpful chart.
Yes.
Yeah. So now that you see it, you're like, okay, we're pretty flat. We're pretty level. And if we start like next year in 27, your first amortization might be 28, to layer it off. Yeah, there's going to be natural drop off, which is great. We want that to happen. But by doing level principal, you're going to spike to 20 million. And like you create more spikiness when I don't know that you're, the numbers they've just gotten bigger. So I think it's very customary. I don't, my years, 20 plus years running debt service schedules and refunding analysis for municipalities. The level debt is kind of par for the course. That's that most people want to do. And the incremental amount of if you want to accelerate debt service, when does that happen? I'll tell you when accelerating debt service happens. One example is if a bond issue is up for a refinancing because interest rates have dropped and you can now refinance at a lower rate and save some money. One scenario is you can take your savings over time, meaning you structure the debt exactly underneath where the old debt was and you capture the savings. Or you accelerate the debt, match the same debt service, and retire the bonds earlier. So like if you're used to paying $1 million a year on this little $8 million you know, bond issue, and you can refinance it. And instead of saving $75,000 a year, why don't I just continue to pay $1 million and retire the debt faster? So that's another tool for how you would, you know, create savings without with also taking into account managing a budget and being thoughtful of, the future.
The
I will point out the thing that you keep using the word savings, which is a little bit the wrong word. You're managing cash flow, right? And you're distributing the cash flow evenly. We're not actually saving any money
If you're
through
doing a
level.
refinancing, if you
If
if
you
you
do
have
the
your
refinancing,
bonds at
yeah,
4 and
I
you can
get that.
yeah, you
Yeah,
create savings if you're lowering the cost.
yeah, no,
Yes.
absolutely. And I know the town
Yeah,
pays attention to that.
we're
Right.
trying to.
Well, also on this new bond, if and correct me, I thought they mentioned that the refinance would be in 7 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's
Yeah.
pretty customary. Yeah.
So,
You
I
you
mean,
get one bite at the apple is what you get, which
yeah.
is unfortunate.
And I'll be honest, I know that Jenny actually looks at every bond issues that we have. She did that when she was on F&B.
Nerd.
Um, and brings to their attention when it looks like it's a good time to do a refinance. So as long as Jenny's still watching things, I know that somebody outside of the bond advisor is also doing that. So um, I just think that this is a good year to start biting the bullet, only because we know that the 248 mil that we have next year isn't going to be 248 in 2, 3 years, unless we're doing a major deferral on Middlesex. I'm not recommending that. I'm just putting that out there. I don't want all the school parents writing to me. Um, but those are the decisions that we're going to have to make. You also have to make a decision that if you're so worried about the mill rate, and there were some very good questions asked at the Board of Finance, some of them on the self-insurance we actually had addressed in our prior meeting. But, you either have to start to cut the operating budgets, and there was an agreement that if we purchased Great Island, the same agreement wasn't done for the schools, but if we purchased Great Island, there wouldn't be a challenge to the operating budgets of either the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen. That was one of the agreements that we had from the administration at the time that we bought it. But they are going up. And some of it's contractual, some of it's just that we have to do expansion or add, similar to the fact that we knew we were going to be adding a fire marshal to do inspections this year. There's other staff that's being added on the Board of Ed, and there's some reductions there as well. But you either have to cut operating or not approve capital. And I don't think that we're in the position. I mean, I know this committee thought that both of the budget were fairly well constructed. Um, and you're not going to find millions of dollars of savings in either one of them. And that, finally having access instead of the early access project, the finally access project to Great Island is important, as well as the drainage and other projects that are going down the road. So that's the challenge. And so because that's the challenge, I'm pretty much in favor of not deferring, because we've already deferred 2 years on this, and start to just pay principal, only because we know that when you look at that debt service and that chart, which is a great chart, what John did in his debt service is he layered the next several things that are coming down the road onto that. And Middlesex was layered at 50 mil, if I recall. So that's almost the chart that we have to look at for what our debt is going to be. And to a certain extent, we're actually pushing the amount of debt that we have outstanding by deferring, not paying principal. That's just my opinion on that. Are there other thoughts on here? Does everybody have a great understanding of debt service? They're going to challenge
I
Jenny by going into the market now and doing municipal bonds. And sorry,
The only thing that threw me off there was you said we're going to start biting the bullet this year. I thought we started to bite the bullet a little bit last year, didn't we? In your concept of that?
we did 2 years interest only.
This is the first year we're going to start fully amortizing the rest of Great Island. That's why
Yeah.
if you look at the Board of Selectmen budget, there's a 16% increase in debt service, which is a big driver of their budget increase. That's really Great Island coming on to be amortized
And
out.
it's also some of the rest of the school
Yes.
coming on as well.
Yeah.
I mean, understand from the Great Island, there's also a difference. And I'm not sure of the exact rate, but we were paying in the twos on the bond anticipation notes because we're paying it back in a year. So you get a lower rate. The anticipated debt service, I believe, is about 3.35 in the analysis that's given to the Board of Finance for tomorrow's discussion, if I read that chart right.
I think it's a little more, but
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is a fiscal year or an annual, but
Yeah.
it's like for the including the 20-year and the 30-year borrowing, it's like, probably closer to 4.1 million. If you don't defer versus 4.2, a little more 2 million. It's a difference of it's not, and these are rough, these could change, but it's about an $85,000 difference if between no deferral and a 1-year deferral. And but in the first year you could save like 1.3 million. But over the course of the whole bond issue, you could probably spend close to 850,000. So it costs you more, you save some upfront, but it ends up overall costing you a little bit more. Question
Can you,
is, what's that?
no, I was going to say when you're done, this year we have a little bit of nuance in how we're doing our debt because we're going to be doing both 30-year and 20-year,
Yeah.
I believe, in the same bond issuance.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that works a little bit?
Oh, they're just well, I don't think they're going to the way he's presented it is two different bond issues
Okay, good.
under the
All right.
same resolution. So it could very well end up that way. Or it can be just combined amortization schedules that looks kind of front end, obviously the first 20 years is more and then it
Bigger.
tapers off the last 10 years. But I think the way he's showing it to me or has showed it to us is he broke out, this is what a 30-year amortization looks like. This is what a 20-year amortization looks like. So I'm not sure how that's going to be disclosed in the official statement just yet.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there because there was a big conversation. There's a difference, for the first 20 years, you're doing something here and then it drops off a little bit in what the debt for that bond is and other things
Right.
like that. And
My guess is they're going to be combined. Because the credit is the same, it's general obligation debt. It's
Yeah.
not a different credit. So we'll see how it gets presented.
so I am interested in what committee members think of a 1-year deferral or paying off our principal and using some of the funds that we're getting because the uh, grant list increased significantly this year at 1.5%. That's not typical, but that's because a lot of things came online. And even with the other construction projects that are out there, we should not anticipate that's happening again next year. But yeah, I'm curious what the individual committee members think and any other questions for Jenny. Peter?
Well, Jack, I think if we have the opportunity to have this um, amount of money to be able to pay down, I think we should. I'm a long-term skeptic in terms of negative impact on the long-term debt load on operating budgets. And I think anything we can do to keep that down, that's good.
Others, Mike?
I agree too. If we're anticipating the operating budget is going to continue to rise and just hearing all these projects, that's what I see. I see where we're going. If we could pay down some of the principal, it makes sense to me.
Charles, your mic is off. I'm going to ask you what you're thinking. Both Charleses.
No, I agree with what Mike said. I think if we can make a dent in the principal, I think that'll serve us well later. That's my opinion.
I concur. When Corbin District comes on, will there not be a similar bump in terms of the grand list as to what we're seeing this year, or what was 1.5%? Was that Darien Commons, or what
It was several of the projects. Plus, you got to remember for all these projects, when the stores were vacant, we didn't have the personal property increase. And I'll send that out to everyone so they can see what it is. But a lot of this was Corbin has moved forward, and what they develop, it's similar to a construction loan where experts come in and value what the construction is to date. It doesn't have to be completed. When I did some audit of loan portfolios, the you may have 50 million for building a building, but experts would come in and determine how far along in that building was there to determine how much more money the construction company got based upon their percentage of completion. They didn't get the 50 million all up front. It was divvied out based upon the status that they were on. And so Corbin has already started to come in, which I think was a big jump. Plus the other projects now are completed. We still have, I guess it's called Long Meadow. That's the former Nielsen property. That'll be coming on. And there were a couple of small projects that also ended on coming in through P&Z. I have to admit, that's one commission that I do not follow.
Jack, I don't know that you answered the question though. Maybe Jenny knows, but so we've got this one-time bump. We know there's more building going on in town. Is there in a year or two another bump?
There will be next year, but it's not going to be at 1.5. A good part of Corbin has already been put into the grand list.
Okay, so it'll be less than one for sure. So
yes.
Okay. I think that's the question that we're trying to get clear.
Yeah.
Well, we need to make some best guesses on investment income too.
Yeah.
Because the investment income prediction is 2 million, and we were well over that this year. So the question is how I don't know how the Board of Finance is going to make an estimate on what to put in the budget for investment income. I personally don't believe that municipalities should be predicting where interest rates should go. Or where they're going to go, and people say, oh, they're going to come down, or I don't know that. So we have to, our treasurer is very thoughtful in putting forth conservative and reasonable estimates on the way she manages the cash flow. And I think this past year, she was expecting rates to drop faster just to be like on the conservative side, and it didn't happen. So that's great for us, right? What is it? Under promise and over deliver, which is fantastic when it works for you. But if that happens again, that's almost, Jack, how much was it? We're almost
Well, that's the difference in this year. Last year, the Board of Finance added 500,000 to our treasurer's estimate. At the last Board of Finance meeting, when Josh went through what they're expecting, it's going to be tight making the number that that was put in there by the Board of Finance, the total amount of what they have. So we will make it, but if it is, we could be down a little bit from that. The other thing that I mentioned in a previous meeting is that there are some funds that I believe our treasurer did not include, which we have to figure out what those are for a recalculation. But in the prior years, part of the reason why we were so much over is that we bonded HHR for 15 months. We had $23 million of HHR project that was delayed. So we had that sitting in Chase at 2.5% that generated. We've been.
And that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, that's not happening again.
No.
Just this year also, in May, we'll be done with Pear Tree Point, actually April, May, depending upon what the time frame is. But that's $9 million that came out of our general fund. And because we didn't bond for it. I mean, we borrow from the general fund, and the general fund has a significant number of projects that we're first bonding now. We paid $2 million for Hanson. We paid money for Gorham's Pond, none of which has been bonded yet. And that's less money in the general fund to make payments. In fact, STIF, which we were hoping was going to yield more, I think the advantage of STIF this year is only something like $12,000, which is not what was expected at a STIF, which is able to invest in things that municipalities cannot. So that's part of the problem that still has to be reconciled between the treasurer and what funds are going to be available. But the other thing is when Jen Chinesky showed that there was an $800,000 drop in the investment income. The other thing which was unstated is for the last couple of years, because we had so much excess funds available, we were generating over $1 million over what we had in budget, and that was being used to pay down capital and other things. We will not have that going forward. So the real reduction is someplace about $1.8 million, not the $800,000 simply from budget.
So let me just, in that vein, that is why, one of the reasons why we're looking at going to 1 year deferred, and certainly not two. We decided no 2 year deferred, but weighing, it's not just that the grand list is coming in at a great number and may not happen again. But there are other things happening in our investment income and the reason why that was up and now it's down and how that's not happening. So these are all factors in determining whether or not we defer a year or not. And like I said, tomorrow night we'll have the numbers to show. I think it's going to be probably won't be it'll be something close to this. I think a 1 year deferral could reduce our operating budget around 1.3 million. Okay. Over the course of 30 years, it could cost us 850,000 to do that, but that's because we would be smoothing it out later. I can't speak for the Board of Finance, and I need to think more about it and look at all the other factors that are. We'll talk about that tomorrow, but those are the various influences that that we have to consider in order to come up with the right debt structure.
And part of the reason I brought this up is because this will have a big influence in what we end up doing. And it was probably part of the reason why what should have been a quick meeting with the handover of the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen budgets ended up going to about 10:10 on last Tuesday night. But I thought it's important that we have that discussion here, since we are the F&B committee, and that it's available for others to understand, which is why I asked Jenny if she would join us. So is there anybody else who has comments or questions or other things? It's not an easy decision. I mean, I've made up my mind, but unfortunately, I don't have a vote. Uh, but it's not an easy decision to make. So, any other questions here? Okay, I'm going to ask Jenny to stay for 2 more minutes.
Oh, wait, I want to compliment Jenny on answering all of our questions. You did a
Ah.
great job. Thank you.
No problem. I like talking bonds.
I can tell.
Well,
Nerd.
it's one of the reasons that if you haven't noticed, we asked Paul to join us at the last meeting on the Board of Ed because of his expertise in pensions. Jenny was the appropriate choice to ask on this one, being a former F&B member and understanding the bonding extremely well. And it's like a little mini education for all of us. The next thing on the agenda is discuss interaction with the Board of Finance members. Tomorrow night, they're dealing with Public Works. They're also dealing with the Parking Fund, the Great Island Fund, and the sewer funds, the 3 that I mentioned. But Jenny, do you have the schedule of when you're discussing what? I'd asked Jim for it and I can't find it in the thing.
You mean our agenda?
Yeah, what's your agenda for the next couple of weeks? Do you know which ones?
You're gonna make me go find that right now. Hold on a second.
No, just if you can send it to me, that's fine. I'd like to
Yeah,
distribute
I
it
have
to the members.
I have it. Yes, I will send it to you. I have sort of the
rough schedule.
Yeah, I'll send you the schedule.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mike and Bill, I believe you're both on Park and Rec. Jenny's also on Park and Rec. So, feel free to exchange emails and other things like that that's going on. This week we had a meeting on the police department, which both Doug, Laura, and Pierre was at. I think it was a good meeting. But start to communicate. I'll send out who your counterparts are to start to communicate with the Board of Finance members. If you have questions, if you have concerns, let's start to work together on this, because that's the whole concept of the buddy system, is that there's no surprises. My goal has always been that about 5 minutes after the Board of Finance gets done approving the budget, we can do our same budget vote. Now, there are some things that we'll hold off on because if there's a change in healthcare for the town and it comes in after the Board of Finance budget, we'll make the adjustment on the floor of the RTM. The same thing was going to be if the debt service was changing, but based upon the timing of when we have to pay off the ban, that it looks like that should be done before the Board of Finance votes. So I'll be getting that out to everyone over the next day or two, so you know who your counterparty is. After that, we run a little bit longer. Again, Jenny, thank you very much. You see, she's still a Jedi. We're not going to do minutes tonight because we're running on. We'll do it the next time. If there's no further business, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have Pierre and I have Peter O. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. The meeting is now over at 8:50. Thank you very much for having this longer meeting, and I appreciate it.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everyone.